At the end of part 1, we left you standing at the edge of something. You had the philosophy, the rich don't work for money. You had the literacy, assets versus liabilities. You had the strategy, mind your own business, build your column. But right at the moment your assets start working, right at the moment that column begins to generate real, independent income, a hand reaches in, quietly, legally, and it takes the largest cut before you ever see a single dollar. That hand belongs to a system so deeply embedded into the fabric of modern society that most people never question it. They simply accept it as inevitable. The rich, however, discovered something the rest of the world missed. Not a loophole, not a crime, but structural advantage hidden in plain sight inside the history of taxation itself. And that is precisely where we begin. In the mid-1800s, income taxes did not exist the way they exist today. When governments first proposed taxing the rich, the wealthy didn't protest in the streets. They hired lawyers and accountants. They sat in rooms and rewrote the architecture of how money is legally structured. And out of those rooms came the most powerful financial instrument in modern civilization, one that the average person has never been taught to use, but that every major fortune in the world sits inside of: the corporation. Here is the mechanism that changes everything. An employee earns money, pays taxes on that money, and then lives on what remains. That is the sequence the system was designed for: earn, tax, spend. But a corporation operates inside a radically different sequence, one that the law itself makes possible. Earn, spend, then pay taxes only on what's left. The corporation buys the car before taxes. It covers the travel before taxes. It pays for the office, the research, the meals, the tools, all before the government calculates what is owed. This is not evasion. It is the legal architecture that separates the financial reality of those who understand it from those who don't. And the most chilling part? This structure has been available to anyone willing to learn it for over a century. The majority simply never looked. But understanding the structure of protection is only half the equation, because a corporation without assets inside it is just an empty shell, which means the next more dangerous question is this: where do the assets themselves come from? And the answer will disturb you, because it has nothing to do with how much money you currently have. In 1974, a young man named Robert Kiyosaki had almost no money. What he did have was the education his rich dad had given him. Not a formal degree, but a specific way of seeing opportunity where others saw only obstacles. And one afternoon, driving through a foreclosure auction in Hawaii that almost everyone else had ignored, he saw it. A small beachfront property being sold for a fraction of its value because the owner had defaulted on a mortgage. He had no capital of his own. He had no bank loan pre-approved. What he had was the knowledge that the deal itself was the asset, and that the money to fund it could be structured creatively through partnerships and seller financing in ways that required almost none of his own capital up front. He bought it, he sold it, and the profit funded his next asset column. This is what Kiyosaki means when he says the rich invent money. Not counterfeit currency, not financial magic, but the understanding that financial opportunity is not a fixed quantity that gets distributed to people who are already wealthy. It is a skill, a muscle, and like every muscle, it is built through repetition, through financial education, and through the willingness to move when the moment presents itself, rather than waiting for a moment that feels completely safe. The person who waits for perfect safety always waits longest. In a world where financial conditions change quarterly, the most dangerous position is not risk. It is a paralysis of waiting for certainty that never comes. So the rich see opportunities others miss. They use legal structures others don't know exist. They invent capital others assume they need to inherit. And yet, history is littered with brilliant people who understood all of this and still ended up broke. Because there is one final trap, one that is more psychological than financial, one that destroys more potential wealth than taxes and bad investments combined. Kiyosaki tells the story of a young woman, brilliant, MBA educated, working at a newspaper, who approached him after a seminar and asked why he recommended sales training as one of the most important early career investments. She was insulted. "I have a master's degree," she told him. "Why would I learn to sell?" And Kiyosaki's answer was the kind of truth that doesn't feel like a gift when you first receive it. He told her, "The MBA made you valuable to an employer. Learning to sell will make you valuable to yourself." Because here is what the academic system consistently fails to teach. The world doesn't pay you for what you know. It pays you for what you can communicate, negotiate, lead, and deliver under pressure. The most underpaid people on the planet are often the most intellectually sophisticated because they were trained to be excellent in one narrow vertical and never taught to sell, manage, market, or build systems around that excellence. The richest people, by contrast, are often not the most technically brilliant. They are the most combinatorially capable. They took sales skills and layered accounting on top. They took management experience and layered investment literacy underneath. They worked jobs not to collect a salary, but to collect a skill set. The way a chess player studies not to win one game, but to expand the number of moves available in every game they'll ever play. This is the moment the entire book has been building toward. Not a single tip, not a motivational quote, an architecture. The poor dad built his entire financial life around one column. Income from a job, spent on liabilities disguised as assets, a personal home that drained him, a car that depreciated, consumer goods that gave him nothing in return. Every month, the money flowed in. Every month, it flowed directly out. And the gap between income and expenses never widened. It narrowed because the cost of living grew, and the salary, tethered to seniority rather than value, grew slower than the life around it. The rich dad built two worlds simultaneously. He kept his income stream, but he channeled the surplus, not into consumption, not into appearance, into a column of assets that generated their own income. Rental properties that paid rent while he slept, shares in companies that compounded quarterly without requiring his presence, a corporation that allowed him to acquire more assets using pre-tax dollars, legally reducing what the government could claim, and intellectual property, ideas, systems, content, frameworks that paid him long after the work of creating them had ended. Every dollar that entered the asset column became a tiny employee, working around clock, never asking for a holiday, never requiring a promotion, never calling in sick. This is a financial architecture that separates generational wealth from generational debt. Not luck, not inheritance, not extraordinary intelligence. A column, a system, a set of decisions made consistently over time until the asset column produced more income than the job ever could, and the job became optional. This is what Robert Kiyosaki's rich dad taught him on a Saturday morning when he was 9 years old. And this is what the formal education of an entire planet continues to leave out. And yet, knowing all of this, most people still won't move. Not because they can't, but because they've been ambushed by three psychological forces that are more lethal to financial freedom than any recession, any bad market, or any failed investment. The first is fear, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the fear of losing money that whispers, "What if it doesn't work?" so persistently that it becomes indistinguishable from wisdom. The second is cynicism, the cultural armor we build from the opinions of people who never tried. The market is rigged. The system is against us. The rich stay rich because they were born rich. These sentences feel like insight. They function as paralysis. And the third is laziness, not the lounging, do-nothing variety, but the sophisticated laziness of staying perpetually busy, keeping a full calendar, answering every email, optimizing every distraction, all to avoid the single uncomfortable truth that you have not yet started building what matters. Kiyosaki's rich dad identified these three forces decades ago, and his prescription was neither complicated nor gentle. Act in spite of the fear. Do the math before listening to the cynics, and ask yourself, what's in it for me? Not as an act of greed, but as a trigger that converts passive knowledge into active momentum. The column doesn't build itself, but it doesn't require a miracle to build it either. It requires a decision made in clarity, held in discipline, and executed before the voices, internal and external, convince you that you are not the kind of person who does this. Robert Kiyosaki didn't write Rich Dad, Poor Dad to make you feel inspired for 20 minutes and then return to exactly the same life. He wrote it as a disruption, a permanent architectural disruption of everything you were told money is and how it works. And in the 2 parts of this series, we've covered the philosophy of the rich, the literacy that divides financial winners from financial survivors, the strategy of building your own business column, the legal power of the corporation, the creative invention of opportunity, the strategic stacking of skills, and the single architectural diagram that separates the people who die wealthy from the people who die wondering what went wrong. But there are books ahead of this one that go further. There are ideas waiting in the pages of the next titles on this channel that will challenge every remaining assumption you haven't yet questioned about time, leverage, systems, and why most intelligent people never become wealthy. If this kind of deep, uncomfortably honest, cinematic knowledge is a level at which you want to operate, subscribe now. Turn on the notification bell, because the next video is not a summary. It is a strategic intervention, and it begins the moment you decide you are no longer willing to stay exactly where you are.